For decades, Robert Redford wasn't merely respected. He was loved. That golden smile, the windswept hair, the effortless charisma, it all seemed made to measure for the silver screen. Generations of cinema-goers fell under his magic, watching him morph from the dashing outlaw of Butch Cassidy and the Sundance Kid to the weathered mentor of his later years. But beneath the red carpet appearances and iconic movie roles lay a secret much more intimate than any he ever portrayed. Redford didn't merely live a Hollywood glamour life. He lived with a love story he never completely revealed, one that lay in the background and influenced his decisions as heartache and the legacy he created along the way. At 88 today, the iconic actor has finally spoken out. And what he says about the woman who left an indelible mark on his heart is stronger than any screenplay. So, who is she? And why did he suppress her memory for so many years? A rough start. Robert Redford's path was never predetermined. Nobody thought he would become a Hollywood legend. His start was far from glamorous. Years before the Oscars, well before the politics, and years before the Sundance Film Festival was born, Redford was just an awkward, fidgety little kid trying to make his way in a humble Santa Monica neighborhood. His dad was quiet, hardworking, and unassuming, an accountant who lived in his own little world. His mother, warm, supportive, and eternally patient, was the emotional anchor of the family. They weren't affluent. They didn't know anyone in Hollywood. And no one at the time would have imagined that their inquisitive, troublesome son would go on to share screen space with legends and become a legend himself. School never quite added up to him. The system was restrictive, the guidelines incomprehensible, and the classes boring. He wasn't dumb, but he was unconstrainable. What intrigued him were the things that provided space for his imagination to expand: art, drawing, baseball, and tennis. He claimed later in life that he was a bad student, but the reality was more nuanced. He was just not programmed to excel within established confines. He excelled brightest when the institution allowed him to have some space. At the tennis courts, though, he shone. So good was he that he even trained with Pancho Gonzalez, one of the best players of his time. But while he shone with a racket in his hand, he floundered in class. Having signed up at the University of Colorado on an athletic scholarship, his increasing reliance on alcohol cost him heavily. His scholarship disappeared. So did his university place. He was kicked out, lost, humiliated, and lost at what was next. Everybody would have taken that as a dead-end sign. But Redford, rather than fold under defeat, he continued on, looking for something unformed. That quest would soon lead him far from home and, unwittingly, right into the arms of the woman who would forever shape his life. Paris to New York, the woman who saved him from himself. The continent became his refuge. Paris, Rome, Madrid. Redford wandered through Europe with little more than a sketchbook, some francs in his pocket, and a shattered sense of direction. He slept in hostels, sketched in station houses, and immersed himself in the art and anarchy of each city he traveled through. He wasn't pursuing fortune or fame. He was in pursuit of clarity. He had said that sometimes you have to be utterly lost to discover who you truly are. And in those winding, uncertain streets of Europe, he started assembling himself again. When he finally came back to the United States, he did not jump into Hollywood. He joined the Pratt Institute in New York to study painting instead. It was a quiet, lonely job, ideal for someone still tended old sores. But something deeper within him came alive, a desire to speak not only with a brush, but with voice, gesture, and being. Acting found its way into his life almost by happenstance. He enrolled in the American Academy of Dramatic Arts and immersed himself in the art. There were no great roles in store, only little stages, endless rehearsals, and painstaking devotion. It was during this time of turmoil that something unforeseen occurred. In the late 1950s, he encountered a young woman by the name of Lola Van Wagenen. She was centered where he was chaotic, peaceful where he was frenetic. A practicing Mormon from Provo, Utah, she possessed a quiet strength which pierced his turbulence. Against all probability, their worlds crashed together. Theirs was an immediate, fierce, and very real connection. so strong, in fact, that they eloped in 1958, disregarding her family's objections and leaping headfirst into life together. But even as their romance was just beginning, disaster knocked earlier than either of them could have thought. Tragedy strikes, the loss that never healed. Nothing can prepare a parent for the loss of a child. Not even the most powerful love can keep you from experiencing that type of loss. Redford and Lola's first child, Scott, passed away from sudden infant death syndrome at only 2 months old. One instant full of hope and magic, lost in an instant. The devastation was unimaginable, the type of sorrow that takes air from your very lungs and rearranges forever how you look at the world. Redford would come to confess the pain never really did dissipate. It hung around like a ghost, silently influencing the person he turned out to be. But instead of destroying them, the tragedy created something stronger between him and Lola. She didn't flee his sadness. She grabbed it. She became his anchor, his haven, the unshakable presence who saw his potential when he couldn't even see it for himself. In a chaotic world, Lola was his sanctuary. Gradually, piece by brick, Redford's long-shot aspirations started to take shape. In 1963, his chance came on Broadway in Neil Simon's Barefoot in the Park. The show was charged with electricity. Hollywood was no longer a pipe dream. It was beckoning, stardom and strain. TV work was first, The Twilight Zone, Perry Mason, and a series of other roles that honed his presence. Then came Butch Cassidy and The Sundance Kid. That movie didn't establish Redford as famous. It made him iconic, the golden boy of a new Hollywood age. But as his star rose and the world fell in love with Robert Redford, his marriage to Lola started showing subtle signs of tension. By the late 1960s, he was a full-fledged movie star. People screamed his name, studios bid for him. But at home, things were falling apart. He was constantly away, filming, doing interviews, pursuing projects. While Lola raised their 3 living children, Shauna, David, later known as James, and Amy, Redford eventually admitted that he wished he had prioritized his family more frequently. Ambitious, driven, perhaps too much so. But Lola was there, not only his wife, but his muse, his confidant, and his quiet strength. She even stood by him when he introduced the Sundance Film Festival, a risk that would revolutionize independent film. But once cracks begin to appear, they do not often heal. Robert and Lola divorced in 1985 after 27 years of marriage. Romantic rebellion. Their breakup wasn't fiery. There were no sensational headlines or court battles. It just fizzled. 2 weary people tired of being apart, understanding that love, however intense, could not span the distance between them. But even after the contracts had been signed, Redford never ceased to refer to Lola as the love of his life. She had seen him before the fame, before the whirlwind. That sort of love does not disappear. It merely relocates to another space within the heart. Following the divorce, Redford immersed himself in work, yet romance caught up with him. In 1987, he started dating Brazilian actress Sonia Braga. She was lightning and fire, magnetic, raw, intoxicating. Their chemistry set can ablaze, but the flame fizzled out immediately. It was over in a year. Next was another surprise pairing, this time with Swedish actress Lena Olin on the set of Havana in 1990. Initially, it appeared to be just another couple, but there was undeniable chemistry on and off screen. Late-night conversations were the norm, and a single spontaneous kiss uncovered something genuine. For close to a year, they had a relationship founded on vulnerability and respect. But by 1991, it fizzled out unobtrusively, leaving Redford once again plagued by the question of whether he was pursuing love or fleeing the memory of the woman he could never help but recall. A quiet love. By the 1990s, Redford retreated from publicized romances. Instead, he turned to quieter affairs. He met Kathy O'Rear, a costume designer who was not interested in being in the Hollywood limelight. Their romance wasn't splashed on tabloid covers. It transpired in intimate dinners and discussions away from photographers. For the first time in years, Redford wasn't pursuing something, just serenity. But While Kathy brought peace, someone else would enter his life who completely changed everything. The man who didn't know his name. At his Sundance resort in the late 1990s, Redford encountered Sibylle Sagers, a German multimedia artist. She wasn't impressed by fame, unlike others. She didn't recognize him at first. She didn't see a legend, but a man, an artist. They shared interests in nature, art, and environmental activism. Their romance grew richer with the passing years, and they wed in a secret ceremony in Hamburg in 2009. They co-founded The Way of the Rain, a non-governmental organization that combines art and activism for climate protection. Redford frequently stated Sibylle had given him a new life. But even with her by his side, reminders of his own history, particularly the pain of losing his son and the memory of Lola, were still part of him. A final bow. In All Is Lost, 2013, Redford gave a virtually wordless performance as a solitary sailor adrift at sea. Critics greeted it as one of his best. Then, out of left field, he appeared as the bad guy Alexander Pierce in Captain America, The Winter Soldier, and came back briefly in Avengers: Endgame. In 2018, he announced The Old Man and the Gun would be his last role, an elegant goodbye to a career that was characterized by iconic characters. But then he confessed he had regretted publicizing his retirement. Because the truth is, Robert Redford never actually retired. He just decided to live differently with intention, devotion, and ultimately contentment. Legacy of love and loss. Robert Redford is a lot of things. Oscar winner, icon, activist, artist. But most of all, he is a man who lived with courage, loved with passion, and never grew up. From losing a son, to creating Sundance, to loving the woman he could never quite get out of his mind, his life is one of perseverance and authenticity. Even now, at 88, when he looks back on his life, he does not talk of red carpets or box office hits. He talks of Lola, the woman who molded him, grounded him, and whose love left an unerasable imprint. For Redford, she was, and always will be, the love of his life.